The drive to the cabin was supposed to clear Jack Travers's head. He'd imagined himself cruising along the winding mountain roads, watching the sun dip behind jagged peaks, while the scent of pine mingled with the crisp, high-altitude air. Instead, his car's stereo was stuck on static, the heating system smelled like burnt socks, and every curve of the road seemed hell-bent on spilling his travel mug of lukewarm coffee into his lap. "This is it," he muttered, slowing the car as the rickety wooden sign for Cedar Hollow appeared, half hidden by vines. It wasn't much of a town, just a gas station, a diner, and a post office run by a guy named Dale, who always seemed mildly suspicious of anyone mailing more than one package at a time, but it was the last speck of civilization before the wilderness. Jack squinted through his windshield as the road turned rough, bumping and jostling his car. The forest pressed in on either side, dark and dense, the towering pines giving way only for the occasional sliver of moonlight. It had been years since he'd come to the cabin. Work, relationships, and life's general chaos had kept him tethered to the city. Now, burned out from late nights coding for a company that treated him like an overworked algorithm, he was desperate for a reset. "I need this," Jack said aloud, as if convincing himself. But as he rounded the last bend, his heart skipped a beat. The cabin was there just as he remembered it, tucked into a clearing at the edge of a slope, but something was wrong. The windows, which should have been dark and cold, were glowing faintly. A warm, pulsating light spilled out from behind the curtains, casting strange, shifting patterns onto the porch. Jack slammed on the brakes, his car skidding slightly on the gravel. Okay, what the hell? For a moment he sat frozen, his hands gripping the wheel. He hadn't told anyone he was coming here. The cabin was too remote for squatters to stumble across it, and he couldn't imagine the local wildlife had suddenly developed a taste for interior decorating. Then a thought struck him. "Maybe it's Dale," he whispered, though the idea of the grumpy postmaster setting up camp in his cabin was almost more absurd than what he was seeing. Grabbing his flashlight and his phone, just in case he needed to call the police or, more realistically, Dale, Jack got out of the car. The forest was eerily silent. Even the usual sounds of chirping crickets and rustling leaves seemed to have vanished, replaced by a faint hum, low and resonant, that seemed to come from the direction of the cabin. "Great," Jack muttered. "I came out here to escape stress, and now I'm walking into a horror movie." As he approached the cabin, he crouched behind a tree, peering at the scene ahead. Through a small gap in the curtains, he could see movement, shadows dancing in a rhythmic, almost fluid way. He couldn't make out any details, but the light was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't just shining, it was alive, pulsing in waves, as if the cabin itself was breathing. Jack shifted slightly, and his foot snapped a twig. The shadows inside froze. "Nice one, Travers," he muttered, heart pounding. Before he could decide whether to retreat or charge in swinging his flashlight like a weapon, the front door creaked open. Jack held his breath, expecting, well, he didn't know what to expect. A bear? An axe-wielding maniac? Dale with a lantern and a sandwich? What he saw was none of those things. A figure stepped into the doorway, silhouetted against the glowing interior. It was humanoid, but there was something off. The proportions were just slightly wrong, too tall, too elegant, with limbs that moved in a way that was both graceful and unsettling. Then the figure turned, and Jack got a glimpse of its face. Or her face, he realized. It was definitely feminine, but alien in the truest sense of the word. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, catching the faint light in iridescent waves. Her eyes were large and without pupils, glowing faintly with a soft, golden hue. Her hair, or at least what looked like hair, floated gently around her head, as if caught in an invisible breeze. Jack's first coherent thought was, "This is not happening." His second thought was, "I really should have brought more coffee." The alien woman tilted her head, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. Then, with a startling swiftness, she darted back inside, slamming the door shut behind her. "Okay," Jack whispered to himself, backing up a step. So, not Dale. Despite every instinct screaming at him to leave, Jack found himself edging closer to the cabin. His curiosity warred with his fear, and curiosity was winning. He reached the porch, his heart hammering in his chest. The hum was louder now, almost like a low-frequency vibration that he could feel in his bones. Tentatively, he pressed his ear against the wooden door. Seriously? The voice startled him so badly that he yelped and nearly fell off the porch. Spinning around, he found himself face to face with the alien woman, who had somehow snuck outside without making a sound. She stared at him, unblinking, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. Jack raised his hands, palms out. Hi. I live here?" The woman tilted her head again, this time with what he swore was an expression of exasperation. She said something, but the sound that came out was like a mix of musical tones and static, utterly incomprehensible. Jack blinked. "Sorry, I don't speak whatever that is." She sighed, a universal gesture it seemed, and reached into a pouch at her side. Pulling out a small, disc-like device, she pressed a button, and a burst of holographic symbols hovered in the air between them. The device emitted a short burst of static before a robotic voice translated, "Leave." "Dangerous." Jack frowned. "Dangerous? What's dangerous?" The alien woman pointed emphatically at him, then at herself, then back at the cabin. "Oh, great," Jack said, throwing up his hands. "I drive 5 hours to get away from life's insanity, and now there's a glowing space lady telling me to leave my own cabin. This is fine. Totally normal." The woman stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to Jack's astonishment, she rolled her eyes, an unmistakable gesture of shared frustration. "Well," Jack said, lowering his hands and attempting a weak smile, "since we're both having a bad night, how about we start over? Hi, I'm Jack. You are—" The alien hesitated, then pressed another button on her device. "Lyra," the robotic voice translated. Jack nodded. "Lyra. Nice to meet you, I guess." He paused, glancing at the glowing cabin. "So, why are you in my house?" Lyra sighed again, but this time there was something almost human about it. With a resigned wave of her hand, she gestured for Jack to follow her inside. As he stepped through the doorway, Jack realized 2 things. First, the interior of his cabin was almost unrecognizable, transformed into a strange high-tech sanctuary filled with glowing orbs, floating panels, and a peculiar humming device in the corner that looked suspiciously like it could explode. Second, whatever he'd just walked into, it was about to turn his entire life upside down. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "Should have just stayed at Dale's." Jack stood in the middle of what was once his rustic, cozy mountain getaway. The log walls and worn furniture were still there, somewhere, but they'd been overtaken by glowing, humming, and downright incomprehensible alien technology. Strange, translucent panels floated in mid-air, displaying shifting symbols that reminded him of a hyperactive screensaver. The air was warmer, thicker, and smelled faintly of ozone and— was that mint? His gaze landed on a spherical device in the corner, softly humming and emitting a pulsing golden light. "That thing," Jack muttered, pointing at it, "looks like it's about 5 seconds away from either exploding or summoning a demon." Lyra, standing by the device with an expression that screamed, "I regret everything," tapped her translator again. "Not explosion. Stabilizer." Jack blinked. "Oh, great. A stabilizer, because that clears everything up." Lyra tilted her head in what he was starting to recognize as her version of a sarcastic eye roll. She pressed a button on the stabilizer, and the hum lowered a pitch. The glowing panels flickered and rearranged themselves, revealing more of the cabin's original interior. "That's my recliner," Jack said, pointing at the corner now partially visible. "And my coffee table. Glad to see they survived. Whatever this is." Lyra ignored him, focused on adjusting a sequence of controls that floated in the air before her. Her silver, almost liquid-like skin shimmered faintly as she worked. Jack tried not to stare, but it was hard not to. Everything about her was fascinating and terrifying. "So," he said after a moment, his voice intentionally casual, "you want to tell me why my cabin looks like a set from Star Trek?" She paused, glancing at him, then pressed another button on her translator. The robotic voice responded, "Refuge. Hiding. Emergency." Jack folded his arms. "Right. Emergency. That's pretty vague. Did you, crash your spaceship nearby or something?" Lyra hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell him. Finally, she motioned toward a small, flickering hologram that appeared above the stabilizer. It was a schematic of a sleek, elongated vessel with jagged edges that gave it an almost predatory look. Parts of the ship were highlighted in red, clearly indicating damage. "That's your ship?" Jack asked. "Was," the translator replied. "Wait." Jack held up a hand. "You're telling me that thing crashed here? How? I didn't hear anything. No big explosions, no sonic booms, nothing." Lyra pointed toward the schematic, then made a motion with her hand that resembled a slow fade-out. The translator chimed. "Silent entry. Cloaking. Minimal impact." "Of course," Jack muttered, "because if aliens are going to crash on Earth, they'll do it politely." Lyra didn't laugh, but there was a faint twitch at the corner of her mouth. "Okay," Jack said, pacing now. "So your ship crashed. And instead of, I don't know, phoning home or finding another planet, you decided to break into my cabin and turn it into your own personal tech lab." "Isolated," the translator replied. "Safe. No threat." Jack stopped mid-step. "No threat? Are you saying I'm harmless?" Lyra nodded, her golden eyes scanning him briefly before returning to her controls. "Wow," Jack said, feigning offense. "You meet me for 5 minutes and you've already decided I'm no threat? I'll have you know I was very intimidating in high school." The translator didn't bother responding to that. Jack sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I get it. You've got problems. You needed a place to crash, literally. But this is still my cabin. You can't just invade it." At the word invade, Lyra stiffened. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and her posture shifted ever so slightly, as if preparing for something. Jack immediately backpedaled. "Not like that," he said quickly. "I mean, you're not invading like an alien invasion or anything, right? You're just borrowing." She relaxed slightly, but there was a tension in the air now that Jack couldn't ignore. "Okay," he said, holding up his hands. "How about this? You tell me why you're here, and I promise not to freak out. Deal?" Lyra hesitated again, then pressed another button on her translator. "Fleeing. Pursued." Jack frowned. "Pursued? By who?" The translator emitted a series of clicks and static, followed by the word, "Hunters." "Hunters?" Jack repeated. "Like alien bounty hunters? That's a thing?" Lyra nodded solemnly. Jack let out a low whistle. "Well, that's just great. My cabin isn't just an alien Airbnb, it's the hideout for a fugitive. I'm guessing these hunters don't care much about property damage, huh?" Lyra shook her head. Jack sank into his recliner, staring at the ceiling. "You know, I came out here to relax, get away from stress, maybe write a book or learn how to whittle or something. Instead, I've got glowing space tech and intergalactic bad guys on my doorstep. Fantastic." Lyra watched him for a moment, then pressed a few more buttons on her translator. "Not safe," it said. "Must leave." "Yeah, I got that part," Jack said. "But here's the thing. I can't just leave. This is my place. I don't exactly have a second cabin lying around." The translator responded with a flat, robotic monotone. "Regret." Jack chuckled despite himself. "Oh, now you feel bad? That's comforting." Lyra tilted her head, clearly not understanding the sarcasm. "All right," Jack said, standing up. "If we're stuck with each other for now, we might as well figure out a way to keep this place from getting blown to bits by your hunters. Got any ideas?" Lyra hesitated, then tapped a sequence on one of the glowing panels. A holographic display appeared, showing a cluster of small, sleek ships circling the area near the cabin. The translator chimed, "Scouts. Searching." Jack swallowed hard. "How long until they find you? Or us, I guess." Lyra didn't respond directly. Instead, she pointed to the stabilizer, then to the golden pulsing device in the corner. The translator said, "Incomplete. Need time." Jack stared at her. "You're fixing some kind of—" "What? An alien power core? A cloaking device?" "Both," the translator replied. "Of course," Jack muttered. "Why not make it more complicated? While you're at it, can you also install a hot tub? Maybe a pizza oven?" Lyra gave him a blank look, which was somehow more unnerving than an actual glare. "Never mind," Jack said, rubbing his temples. "The point is, we're on a clock, right? We have to finish whatever this is before they find us." Lyra nodded. "All right," Jack said, forcing himself to stay calm. "Let's do this. You tell me what you need and I'll help. But for the record, if your hunters show up and start blasting holes in my cabin, you're paying for the repairs." The translator chirped. "Agree." Jack stared at her, unsure if she was serious or just humoring him. Either way, he had a feeling his quiet weekend getaway was about to get a whole lot louder and weirder. Jack woke the next morning to the soft rhythmic hum of alien machinery and a vague sense of dread. He squinted against the golden light filtering through the window, or more accurately, through what used to be a window. It was now some kind of shimmering force field that hummed when he poked it the night before. He hadn't slept well, thanks to dreams of glowing-eyed hunters blasting his cabin into splinters. "Morning," Jack muttered, dragging himself off the couch. He hadn't dared sleep in his bed, which had been thoroughly commandeered by a floating dome-shaped contraption that looked suspiciously like a high-tech coffee maker. Lyra was already awake, or did she even sleep, and standing by the stabilizer, her delicate hands moving with lightning speed over a holographic interface. Her shimmering silver skin caught the morning light, making her look more like a sculpture than a person. "Do aliens even do mornings?" Jack asked, running a hand through his bedhead. Lyra glanced at him but didn't respond. Her translator device was lying on the table next to a bowl of half-eaten cereal. Jack stared at it. "Wait," he said, pointing. "Did you eat that? Or did my cabin just conjure up floating tech and a ghost that likes frosted flakes?" Lyra picked up the translator and pressed a button. The robotic voice replied, "Tried." "Insufficient." Jack blinked. "What do you mean, insufficient? That's a perfectly good breakfast." The translator buzzed again. "Primitive." Jack put a hand to his chest, feigning offense. "Excuse me, Princess Space Lady, but those are name-brand flakes. They even have marshmallows. Primitive, my foot." Lyra didn't seem amused. She motioned to a sleek device on the counter that Jack hadn't noticed before. It looked like a blender had been fused with a glowing lava lamp. Inside was a swirling, iridescent liquid. "That," Jack said, pointing, "is either your breakfast or the thing that's going to kill me when it inevitably explodes." The translator replied, "Nutrition synthesis." "Safe." Jack grabbed a nearby mug and held it up. "I'll stick to coffee, thanks." He paused. "Wait, do aliens drink coffee? Please tell me you have coffee in space." Lyra stared at him blankly. "No coffee," Jack muttered. "Figures. You've got spaceships and cloaking tech, but no coffee. What a tragedy." Before Lyra could respond, or roll her eyes again, a sharp beeping sound filled the cabin. She froze, her golden eyes narrowing as she spun toward a floating control panel. Jack tensed. "That's not the good kind of beep, is it?" Lyra didn't need the translator for him to know the answer. She tapped furiously on the controls, and a holographic display appeared. On it, a cluster of glowing red dots moved in formation, converging on a central point, the cabin. Jack felt his stomach drop. "Let me guess, those are the hunters?" The translator replied, "Scouts. Proximity increasing." "Great," Jack muttered, grabbing his jacket. "Time to pack up and, oh wait, this is my house, I can't leave." Lyra motioned for him to stay quiet, then pressed a button on the stabilizer. The hum in the air grew louder, and the cabin's glowing panels began to shift and rearrange themselves. The walls shimmered, and the force field over the windows flickered before solidifying again. "Are we cloaking?" Jack asked, his voice rising with hope. The translator replied, "Masking. Temporary." "Temporary?" Jack repeated. "Define temporary. Like 5 minutes? 5 hours? Should I start digging a hole and hiding in it?" Lyra ignored him, her focus entirely on the stabilizer. Jack groaned and ran a hand through his hair. "Fantastic. I came out here to escape stress, and now I'm playing hide-and-seek with alien bounty hunters. My therapist is going to love this." The holographic display shifted, showing the red dots moving closer. Jack leaned over to get a better look, accidentally knocking over a small alien device. It hit the floor with a metallic clink, and Lyra shot him a glare that needed no translation. "Sorry," Jack whispered, picking it up. "But maybe if you labeled this stuff, I wouldn't—" The device in his hand lit up, and a thin, high-pitched whine filled the air. Jack froze. "That's bad, isn't it?" he asked. The translator buzzed, "Destructive." Jack's eyes widened. "Destructive? As in boom?" Lyra snatched the device from his hand and pressed a sequence of buttons. The whine faded, and Jack let out a shaky breath. "Okay," he said, backing away from the table. "I'm officially on a strict don't-touch-anything policy. Happy?" Lyra didn't respond, but the faintest smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. The tension was broken, albeit briefly, by another series of beeps from the control panel. Lyra's smirk vanished as she tapped the panel again. The holographic display zoomed in on the scouts, now dangerously close. Jack felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. "So, what's the plan here? Do we fight them? Hide? Bake them cookies and hope they leave us alone?" Lyra pressed a button, and the translator replied, "Divert." "Divert?" Jack echoed. "How do we—" Before he could finish, Lyra activated another device, and the stabilizer pulsed brightly. A burst of golden light shot into the sky, fading as quickly as it appeared. The translator buzzed. "Signal. False trail." Jack frowned. "Wait, you just sent out a fake signal? Like an intergalactic decoy?" Lyra nodded. "That's genius," Jack admitted, then paused. "Unless, of course, they figure it out and come back angrier. Which they will, because my luck is terrible." The translator chimed. "Likelihood minimal." "Minimal?" Jack said, raising an eyebrow. "I'd like that in writing, please." The holographic display updated, showing the red dots hesitating, then breaking off in a new direction, toward the decoy signal. Jack let out a relieved sigh and collapsed into his recliner. "Well, that was fun," he said sarcastically. "Let's do it again sometime." Lyra powered down the stabilizer, the hum lowering to a soft purr. She glanced at Jack, her expression unreadable before turning back to her controls. Jack watched her for a moment, then said, "You know, if you're going to keep crashing here, we need some ground rules. Like, maybe warn me before you turn my cabin into a glowing spaceship hideout, and definitely no more destructive devices on my coffee table." The translator buzzed. "Understood." Jack smirked. "Progress." But as he leaned back, his gaze drifted to the holographic display. The red dots were gone for now, but something told him this wasn't over. The hunters might be chasing a false trail, but they'd be back. And when they came, Jack had no idea if he or Lyra would be ready. For now, though, he'd take the win. After the scouts disappeared, Jack convinced himself he could finally relax. He grabbed a chair from the kitchen, dragged it to the porch, and sat down with a mug of black coffee, his personal talisman against chaos. The fresh mountain air, scented with pine and damp earth, worked its magic for all of 30 seconds before Lyra appeared in the doorway. "Seriously?" Jack said, looking over his shoulder. "I thought aliens were supposed to be stealthy. Can't I have one moment of peace?" She didn't respond, but her translator, now clipped to her belt, chimed, "Work." Assistance required. Jack groaned. Look, I'm not exactly NASA. Whatever alien genius project you're working on, I'm pretty sure I'll just make it worse. Incorrect, the translator replied with annoying certainty. Jack sipped his coffee, glaring at her. Let me guess. You need me to press a glowing button, and if I press the wrong one, the cabin turns into a black hole. Lyra's expression didn't change, but he caught the faintest twitch of her silver eyebrows. Was that amusement? He wasn't sure, but it was enough to pique his curiosity. Fine, Jack said, standing and setting his mug on the porch rail. Lead the way, Space Princess. Inside, the cabin was more chaotic than ever. The stabilizer now had several new attachments, floating, spinning discs that emitted soft, rhythmic beeps. Another panel projected a map of the surrounding area, dotted with strange, flickering symbols. What am I even looking at? Jack asked, gesturing to the map. Proximity grid, the translator replied. Detects incoming threats. Jack frowned. Great. So, it's like an alien Ring doorbell. Does it also record video of bears stealing my trash cans? Lyra ignored him and pointed to a smaller device on the table. It was the size of a shoebox, covered in glowing runes that shifted and shimmered like liquid. Repair, the translator said. Repair what? Jack asked. Your ship? Your cloaking device? My sanity? Core stabilizer, the translator replied. Malfunction imminent. Jack raised an eyebrow. Imminent? As in, hurry up and fix it, or we're toast? Lyra nodded. Well, that's just fantastic, Jack muttered, leaning closer to the device. What exactly do you need me to do? I don't speak alien, and I'm pretty sure duct tape isn't going to cut it. Lyra tapped a sequence on the stabilizer, and a holographic diagram appeared. It showed the device's internal components, overlaid with blinking red lines that clearly indicated something was wrong. She pointed to a specific section, then handed Jack a tool that looked like a cross between a screwdriver and a plasma torch. Adjust, the translator said. Jack hesitated, staring at the tool. Adjust what? This thing? What if I accidentally turn it into a bomb? Minimal risk, the translator replied. Jack's jaw dropped. Minimal risk? That's not exactly comforting. Lyra stepped back, crossing her arms as if to say, Get on with it. Jack sighed and crouched by the device, squinting at the glowing runes. All right, he muttered. Let's see, twist this? No, wait, maybe it's... The device emitted a sharp beep, and Jack froze. Okay, that's either good or very, very bad. Which is it? Lyra leaned over his shoulder, adjusted a knob, and the beeping stopped. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Teamwork, the translator said, almost smugly. Yeah, Jack grumbled. You're welcome. A few hours later, the repairs were complete, or so Lyra claimed. Jack didn't fully trust the glowing contraption, but he figured if it hadn't exploded yet, it was probably fine. He slumped onto the couch, exhausted. So, he said, watching Lyra as she tinkered with yet another device. What happens now? You fix your ship, fly off into the sunset, and I go back to pretending aliens don't exist? Lyra hesitated, her golden eyes flicking to him before she pressed her translator. Complicated. Jack raised an eyebrow. Complicated how? Are you staying? Because I'm going to need to charge rent. The translator buzzed. Hunter's persistent. Risk remains. Jack sighed. Of course, because nothing's ever simple. Lyra pressed another button on the translator, and it emitted a series of clicks and whistles. A moment later it said, Assistance required. Jack blinked. Wait, you need my help? Are you sure you've got the right guy? The translator replied. Affirmative. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. Lady, I'm a guy who gets winded walking up a flight of stairs. What could I possibly do to help you fight alien bounty hunters? Lyra pointed to the proximity grid, which now displayed several faint red dots on the edge of the map. Jack's stomach sank. Don't tell me they're back. Scouts, the translator said. Testing perimeter. Jack rubbed his temples. Okay, so what's the plan? Because I'm not exactly equipped to deal with this. The closest thing I have to a weapon is a bear spray can, and I'm pretty sure that won't work on aliens. Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she activated another holographic display, showing a sleek, handheld device that resembled a high-tech stun gun. Whoa, Jack said, leaning closer. Is that what I think it is? Defensive, the translator said. Non-lethal. Jack stared at her. You're giving me an alien weapon? Lyra nodded and handed him the device. It was surprisingly light, and the grip molded perfectly to his hand. All right, Jack said, testing the weight. I'll admit this is kind of cool, but you realize I have no idea how to use it, right? Lyra stepped closer, pressing a sequence on the translator. It said, Training required. Jack groaned. Great. Alien boot camp. Just what I needed. For the next hour, Lyra put Jack through what could only be described as a crash course in alien defense tactics. He learned how to activate the stun gun. Turns out the glowing button wasn't decorative. Aim it at moving targets, he missed most of them, and avoid accidentally stunning himself. He failed once. By the end of the session, Jack was sweating, sore, and more than a little frustrated. You know, he said, leaning against the wall, I always thought if I ever got to use an alien weapon, it'd be to save the world or something. Not because I'm trying to protect my cabin from intergalactic repo men. Lyra didn't laugh, but she gave him a look that was almost sympathetic. Thanks for the pep talk, Jack muttered. Real inspiring. The proximity grid beeped again, and both of them turned toward it. The red dots were closer now, moving in an erratic searching pattern. Jack tightened his grip on the stun gun. Well, he said, forcing a grin, looks like it's showtime. Let's see if all that training pays off, or if I'm about to become the first guy in history to get zapped by his own alien sidekick. Lyra stepped forward, her golden eyes focused and unflinching. For the first time, Jack saw a flicker of something deeper in her expression. Determination, maybe even fear. Whatever happened next, he had a feeling life in the mountains would never be the same again. The proximity grid's incessant beeping filled the cabin, each pulse like a countdown ticking closer to disaster. Jack peered over Lyra's shoulder as she studied the display, her golden eyes narrowing in concentration. Okay, Jack said, shifting nervously from foot to foot. What's the plan, Commander Silverskin? Please tell me it involves a foolproof way to make them go away, preferably without me getting fried like a bug in a zapper. Lyra didn't glance at him. Her fingers danced across the stabilizer's holographic interface, pulling up a series of glowing symbols and diagrams that looked like alien hieroglyphs. The translator finally responded, Engage minimally. Delay pursuit. Jack threw his hands up. Oh, great. That's not vague at all. How about I just stand on the porch and yell, Shoo, alien hunters? Would that work? Lyra tilted her head, giving him a look that was both patient and exasperated, like a teacher explaining something for the third time to a particularly slow student. Fine, Jack grumbled, gripping the alien stun gun she had given him. But for the record, I'm more of a runaway and live another day kind of guy. The plan, if you could call it that, started with Jack stationed near the back door while Lyra manned the stabilizer. She had activated what she called a localized distortion field, which, according to her translator, would scramble the hunter's sensors and slow them down. To Jack, it mostly just made the air around the cabin hum ominously, like a microwave on the verge of exploding. What happens if this field thing backfires? Jack asked, poking the shimmering air near the doorframe. Are we talking a minor glitch, or like kaboom? The translator buzzed. Energy discharge possible. Radius, 100 meters. Jack froze. 100 meters? That's not a minor glitch. That's a fireworks show. Why didn't you lead with that? Probability low, the translator added. Oh, well, that's reassuring, Jack muttered, taking several steps away from the distortion field. Low probability. just like low chances of rain, right before it pours. Lyra, seemingly unbothered by his ranting, activated another set of controls. This time, a holographic image of the approaching scouts appeared, projected in midair. The 3 red dots now had shapes, sleek insectoid crafts that hovered unnervingly close to the treetops. Jack squinted at the display. Are those drones? Please tell me those are drones and not like flying aliens with laser eyes. Remotely operated, the translator confirmed. Autonomous search units. Jack groaned. Fantastic, because regular hunters weren't bad enough. You had to bring robots into this. As the first drone broke through the tree line, Jack's nerves hit a new high. The sleek, beetle-like craft emitted a low buzzing sound as it hovered near the cabin, scanning the area with a pulsating red light. Okay, Jack whispered, clutching the stun gun tightly. This is it. Showtime. Remember, Jack. Aim. Fire. Don't hit yourself. Before he could psych himself out any further, the drone tilted toward the distortion field, its sensors visibly flickering. The field worked as promised, distorting its data stream, but the drone wasn't retreating. Instead, it seemed to be recalibrating. Lyra, Jack hissed. Your fancy field is great and all, but it's not exactly scaring them off. Lyra responded by activating a second device, a small, spherical gadget that rolled to the center of the room before rising into the air. It emitted a sharp, high-frequency sound that made Jack wince. What's that supposed to do? Jack asked, covering his ears. The translator buzzed. Countermeasure. Disrupts drone communication. Jack watched as the drone faltered midair, its red light flickering erratically. For a moment, it looked like the plan might actually work. But then, the drone emitted a sharp, mechanical screech and launched a bright, sizzling beam straight at the cabin. The beam hit the porch railing, reducing it to a smoldering pile of ash. Yup, that's my cue to panic, Jack yelled, diving for cover. Lyra moved with inhuman speed, her silver form a blur as she activated the cabin's defensive measures. Panels on the wall shifted, revealing hidden emitters that began firing bursts of golden energy at the drones. Wait, you had lasers this whole time? Jack shouted over the noise. Why didn't you lead with that? The translator didn't bother replying. Jack peeked out from behind an overturned chair, watching as one of the drones spiraled out of control, its hull glowing red-hot from the laser fire. It crashed into the ground with a satisfying explosion. Okay, 1 down, Jack muttered. 2 to go. No problem, right? His confidence evaporated as the second drone swooped toward the cabin, dodging the lasers with unsettling precision. Its buzzing grew louder, almost angry, as it fired another beam. This one hit the stabilizer, sending sparks flying. Lyra! Jack yelled. Your magical spacebox thingy just got fried. Is that bad? That's bad, isn't it? Lyra didn't respond, her focus entirely on the remaining drones. Jack took a deep breath and clutched his stun gun, deciding that if he was going to die, he might as well go out swinging, or in this case, zapping. The second drone was closing in when Jack spotted a loose plank from the destroyed porch railing. Acting on pure adrenaline, and probably a little stupidity, he grabbed the plank and hurled it at the drone. To his utter surprise, the plank struck the drone's sensor array, sending it veering wildly off course. It smashed into a tree, where it exploded in a shower of sparks. Jack stared at the wreckage, his mouth hanging open. Did I just take out a drone with a piece of wood? The translator buzzed. Improbable success. Yeah, no kidding, Jack muttered, still in shock. The third drone, however, was not impressed. It darted toward the cabin, its red light glowing brighter. Jack raised his stun gun, fumbling to aim as the drone lined up for an attack. Any time now, Lyra, he shouted. At the last second, Lyra activated the countermeasure device again, this time amplifying its frequency. The drone faltered, its systems overloading, before it dropped to the ground like a stone. As silence finally returned to the cabin, Jack slumped against the wall, his heart pounding. Okay, he said, panting. Let's all agree that was way too close. Lyra didn't respond, but there was a faint flicker of relief in her golden eyes as she deactivated the distortion field. Jack looked at the smoldering wreckage outside and shook his head. So much for a quiet weekend in the mountains. I'm pretty sure this cabin has seen more action in the last 24 hours than I have in my entire life. The translator buzzed. Exaggeration noted. Jack snorted. Oh, great. Now the translator's a comedian. Lyra glanced at him, her expression softening ever so slightly. For a moment, Jack thought he saw a hint of gratitude in her gaze. Don't mention it, he said, waving her off. But next time, maybe give me a heads up before the flying death robots show up, okay? The translator replied simply, Acknowledged. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. I swear, if I survive this, I'm writing a survival guide. How to not die when an alien moves into your cabin. Think it'll sell. For the first time, Lyra's lips quirked upward in what might have been a smile. The cabin was finally quiet. Well, as quiet as a building could be after surviving an alien drone attack, a porch vaporization, and the unmistakable aroma of burning circuitry. Jack sat on the couch with a half-empty mug of reheated coffee, staring at the smoldering remains of what used to be his backyard. I've got to hand it to you, Jack said, breaking the silence. When you crash into someone's life, you really commit. Lyra stood at the stabilizer, running diagnostics while her translator hovered at her hip. She didn't glance back at him, but the translator buzzed, Assessment unclear. Jack smirked. It means you're great at causing chaos, Space Princess. Top-notch work. Gold medal. The translator didn't respond this time, and Jack took another sip of his lukewarm coffee. Despite his sarcasm, he couldn't deny the faint buzz of adrenaline still coursing through him. Somehow they'd survived the drones. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get worse. Yet the stabilizer beeped, and Lyra frowned, or at least Jack thought it was a frown. Her face was so unreadable most of the time that he'd started assigning her expressions like an alien poker game. Bad news? Jack asked, setting his mug down. The translator chimed, Defensive grid compromised. Pursuers likely escalating. Jack groaned, leaning back on the couch. Of course they are, because life in the middle of nowhere wasn't already exciting enough. Assistance required, the translator added. Jack pointed at himself. Me? What do you think I'm going to do? Build a spaceship out of duct tape and desperation? Lyra finally turned to him, her golden eyes steady. She gestured toward the stabilizer, then to the holographic map that now displayed a larger grid, one that included the entire region. A series of red markers pulsed ominously, surrounding the area like a noose tightening around the cabin. Jack blinked. Wait, are those more drones? Hunter vessels, the translator corrected. Oh, terrific, Jack said, throwing his hands up. Not just drones, now we've got ships. What's next? A mothership with its own theme music. The translator offered no snarky retort this time, which only made Jack more nervous. The plan, or as Jack referred to it, the please don't get me killed scheme, was simple in theory. They needed to activate a long-range communications device hidden inside Lyra's damaged ship to send out a distress signal. The catch? The ship's wreckage was located 3 miles away, deep in the forest, and it was almost certainly being watched. Let me get this straight, Jack said, as Lyra adjusted the straps on his makeshift tactical backpack. We're hiking through alien-infested woods to turn on a glowing beacon, which will probably make us even bigger targets. Does that about sum it up? Affirmative, the translator replied. Jack sighed. You know, when I bought this cabin, the scariest thing I thought I'd have to deal with was a bear breaking into my pantry, not this intergalactic laser tag nightmare. Lyra handed him a small device shaped like a disc. It hummed softly in his hand, glowing faintly around the edges. What's this? Jack asked, turning it over. Cloaking emitter, the translator said. Temporary invisibility. Jack's eyes widened. Whoa, hold on. You're giving me an invisibility cloak? Like for real? Why didn't we use this sooner? Limited duration, the translator explained. Jack deflated slightly. Figures. Still, this is officially the coolest thing I've ever owned. Do I get to keep it after this? Lyra's expression didn't change, but Jack could have sworn he caught a flicker of annoyance. Fine, fine, he muttered. Let's go save the galaxy or whatever. The forest at night was a strange mix of beauty and terror. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting silver patterns across the ground. Jack couldn't decide if the distant hums and chirps were just nature doing its thing or the subtle whir of alien scouts. You know, Jack whispered as they trudged through the underbrush. This whole silent hike of doom thing could use some levity. Got any alien jokes? Lyra didn't respond, but the translator buzzed. Input humor. Define parameters. Jack snorted. Forget it. I doubt you get my jokes anyway. Attempt appreciated, the translator said, and Jack couldn't tell if it was mocking him. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached the clearing where Lyra's ship lay hidden beneath a dense tangle of vines and debris. The craft was smaller than Jack had expected, sleek and angular, with a faint metallic sheen that seemed to ripple under the moonlight. Wow, Jack said, stepping closer. It's like a stealth fighter and a sci-fi movie prop had a baby. Lyra ignored him, focusing instead on the ship's access panel. She tapped a sequence of symbols, and the vines shifted, revealing a hatch. Okay, Jack said, gripping the stun gun strapped to his side. Let's make this quick before your fan club shows up. As if on cue, the proximity scanner on Lyra's wrist beeped. Jack glanced at it, his stomach sinking. Let me guess, he said. We've got company. The translator confirmed. 2 approaching vessels. Estimated arrival, 5 minutes. Jack cursed under his breath. Of course. Nothing's ever easy. Inside the ship, Lyra worked quickly, activating the comms array and inputting a series of commands. The interior was cramped but efficient, with panels that glowed softly as she moved. Jack hovered near the entrance, peeking out nervously. The forest was eerily still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. How much longer? He asked, his voice tinged with panic. Finalizing sequence, the translator said. Jack groaned. Great, because we've got about 2 minutes before... A low mechanical hum cut through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large breaking through the treetops. Jack spun around, his heart racing. They're here! Lyra didn't flinch, her focus unwavering as she completed the final command. The ship's console emitted a high-pitched tone, and the translator said, Signal transmitted. Assistance en route. Fantastic, Jack said, gripping the stun gun. Now let's hope we live long enough to see it. The first hunter vessel appeared above the clearing, its sleek black hull glowing faintly. It hovered menacingly, its underside bristling with what Jack could only assume were weapons. Lyra, Jack said, backing toward the ship. Please tell me you've got a plan. The translator buzzed. Defensive measures engaged. Before Jack could ask what that meant, the ship's exterior lit up with bursts of golden energy. The hunter vessel fired back, its beam slicing through the clearing and narrowly missing Jack. Okay, that's enough excitement for one night, Jack yelled, diving for cover behind a fallen log. Lyra emerged from the ship, her own weapon drawn, and began firing precise, controlled shots at the vessel. Her movements were fluid, almost graceful, as she dodged return fire. Jack, meanwhile, fumbled with his stun gun, muttering, "Why does this always happen to me?" By the time reinforcements arrived, sleek silver ships that matched Lyra's, the clearing was a smoking battlefield. The hunter vessel had been forced into retreat, and Jack sat slumped against a tree, his nerves completely shot. As Lyra coordinated with her allies, Jack let out a tired laugh. I swear, the next time I see a for sale sign on a mountain cabin, I'm burning it. The translator buzzed. Humor noted. Jack grinned weakly. Glad someone appreciates it. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it out of this alive. The first rays of dawn filtered through the cabin's broken windows, painting streaks of light across the soot-stained walls. The air was thick with the mingled scents of scorched wood, alien metals, and something Jack could only describe as burnt electrical lemon. He sat at the kitchen table, holding what remained of his favorite coffee mug, now chipped and slightly warped from the chaos of the past few days. Across from him, Lyra stood silently, her sleek silver uniform restored to its former shine. Her translator hummed softly at her side, awaiting its next task. Well, Jack said, leaning back with a weary sigh, that was the most exciting week of my life, and I once got chased by a raccoon wielding a garden rake. The translator buzzed, translating Lyra's faint smile into words. Uncertain if comparison is flattering or tragic. Jack smirked. Probably both. The silver rescue ships had departed an hour earlier, taking the remnants of Lyra's damaged craft and the bodies of her pursuers with them. It was oddly quiet now, almost eerily so, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. So, Jack said, gesturing to the scorched remains of his porch, what's next for you? Back to ruling your galactic empire or whatever? Lyra tilted her head, her golden eyes catching the light. Not empire, alliance, the translator corrected. Mission remains incomplete. Jack frowned. Incomplete? What, you're not done running for your life? The translator hesitated before responding. Pursuers are eliminated, threat minimized, but alliances require more than survival. They demand trust and understanding. Jack raised an eyebrow. So what, you're on some kind of diplomatic quest? Lyra nodded. Jack let out a low whistle. Yikes, no offense, but you might want to work on your first impressions. You kind of started our alliance by pointing a laser gun at my face. The translator buzzed. Noted. The two sat in silence for a moment, the quiet punctuated only by the occasional creak of the damaged roof. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his gaze drifting to the ruins of his once peaceful cabin. I guess this is goodbye, he said, his voice softer now. Lyra inclined her head. Gratitude. Assistance was unexpected, but invaluable. Jack chuckled. Yeah, well, you didn't leave me much choice. Besides, it's not every day you get to help an alien princess on the run from intergalactic assassins. The translator buzzed. Not princess, diplomatic envoy. Jack smirked. Whatever you say, Your Highness. As Lyra turned to leave, Jack felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Loss? Regret? Maybe just the realization that for all its danger and insanity, the past week had been extraordinary. Hey, he called after her. Wait. She paused, looking back at him. Jack hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Listen, if you ever, need a place to crash again, maybe next time you don't blow up the porch first, huh? The translator buzzed. Acknowledged. Offer appreciated. Jack grinned. Good. Because I don't think my insurance covers alien shenanigans. As Lyra stepped outside, the faint hum of her personal transport filled the air. Jack followed her to the edge of the clearing, where a sleek disc-shaped craft waited, its surface shimmering like liquid mercury. She turned to face him one last time, her golden eyes meeting his. Farewell, Jack, the translator said. May your solitude bring peace and fewer disruptions. Jack snorted. I'll drink to that. With a final nod, Lyra stepped into the craft. The air shimmered around her, and within moments, she was gone, leaving Jack alone in the clearing. The days that followed felt surreal. The cabin was quieter than it had ever been. But Jack found himself noticing the little things more: the rustle of the wind through the trees, the calls of distant birds, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. For a man who'd once prized solitude above all else, he now found the silence almost unsettling. He spent the next week rebuilding what he could, patching up the roof and jury-rigging the porch into something functional. The scars of the battle remained, but Jack decided to leave them. They were part of the story now, a story he wasn't sure anyone would believe if he ever bothered to tell it. One evening, as he sat on the newly rebuilt porch with a fresh cup of coffee, Jack found himself staring up at the stars. He'd never paid much attention to them before, but now they felt different, bigger, more alive. He smiled faintly, raising his mug in a mock toast. "Here's to you, Lyra," he murmured, "wherever you are." A month later, Jack's cabin had almost returned to normal. The porch had a new set of chairs, the roof no longer leaked, and the pantry was fully stocked. Then, one night, as he sat tinkering with the cloaking emitter Lyra had accidentally left behind, the device buzzed to life. Jack blinked in surprise as a tiny hologram flickered into view, a familiar figure with golden eyes and an almost smile. "Jack," the translator said, "situation developing. Your assistance required." Jack stared at the hologram, a mix of disbelief and amusement spreading across his face. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. The hologram remained, waiting. Jack set the emitter down, shaking his head with a laugh. "Well," he said, grabbing his jacket, "so much for quiet." As he stepped outside, the stars above seemed brighter than ever, and somewhere, out there in the vastness of the universe, adventure awaited.